So I don't know about you, but when I look out over the world around us, man, we got some issues going on here, right? I mean, we have turmoil in virtually every area of our society. I mean, we got political turmoil that's just crazy. I mean, it's bizarre, you know, and in our society. I mean, who would have ever thought that a filthy, profanity-laced song would be lifted up as great? But Dr. Seuss's band, all of a sudden, you know, what is up with this? There are crazy people going on, you know. And then in the even in the church world, even in what we would consider an evangelical church world, man, there's this chaos and confusion and discouragement and anger, and these people at each other. I mean, it is really crazy out. And you just look at it and say, man, the world is an absolute mess. Now, the tendency is to think that how things are now is the worst it's ever been. It's never been this bad before. And I just don't think that's necessarily true. Think of the world that Jesus ministered in. We tend to look at it as being very peaceful and idyllic. Nah, absolutely not. You talk about political turmoil. Okay, Israel as a nation doesn't really exist back then. It's a people group, kind of an idea, but that area that we now call Israel has been conquered, and the conquerors have been conquered, and more people have conquered. It's just been a highway of conquering armies back and forth by the time Jesus arrives on the scene. Yes, it's controlled by Rome, but these dear folks living there are not Roman citizens. For the most part, they're just Roman subjects. Very few, if any, rights. And that's particularly true if you're a woman in that time frame. This is bad. Okay, so that's going on. Then you have the religious world right then. You talk about another mess. You talk about factions. You got the Pharisees, you got the Sadducees, you got the Essenes, you have a group called the Hellenists, and there's probably 3 or 4 other ones that are going on. And they're constantly fighting back and forth, and it's this constant mess. And the poor people are just walking around society trying to keep your head down, you know. I want to stay away from the Roman people, the Roman soldiers. I don't know what they're going to make me do. I mean, it's crazy stuff going on. Religious people are fighting back and forth, and they're just trying to survive. And so in the midst of this, here's what Jesus says. This is Matthew 9. This is our launching pad for where we're going to go today. Matthew 9, starting at verse 36. But when he, that's Jesus, saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them. Now watch this. Jesus doesn't describe today, because they were weary and scattered, like sheep having no shepherd. And he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few. Therefore pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Okay, now we're not a rural or agrarian group here very much. Some of you may have some land and like to play with a tractor and do a few things. But basically, we are a city or something. Look out, we're a city or suburban type group. Okay, so let me put this in a little different vernacular so maybe it works for us. Okay, so we can understand what he's talking about here. Harvest is plentiful, laborers are few. In other words, there's a lot of work to do. Hopefully this fall, we are going to be able to gather in Columbus at that big, huge outdoor building. We call it the Horseshoe. 100,000 people there. They do the same thing in Ann Arbor, but we'll deal with that. Anyhow, so you got 100,000 people there watching a football game. Now, there's only 22 people at one time playing the game. All right? You got a handful of other folks that run it, but that's it. 100,000 people, 22 playing. Okay? There's a lot of football to be played, but there's only a handful of people actually doing it. Or maybe a concert. I'm thinking like a symphony orchestra. You know, and you got 20, 30, 40, I don't know, maybe 60 musicians, you know, and they're drums or timpani drums, you know, and they got the trombones and a couple violins and so on. And they're doing the whole thing. But really, the crowd is what, 100, 300, 400, maybe 1,000 people watching, 40 or 60 actually playing it. Look, there's a lot of music to be played. There's very few musicians. There's a lot of work to be done because Jesus said, the harvest is plentiful. Just like in his day, it's ours. The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. We're going to drop into an Old Testament passage. When we first go there, you're going to look at this and go, what in the world? I don't see the connection here. But I want to walk you through this because I think there's some richness in this passage that could really help us better come to the terms with this, because I believe with all of my heart, we all have a role to play. Every single one of us. Why? Because the harvest is plentiful. The laborers are few. I'm going to come back to this constantly because I just think it's so important. So we're going to be in Psalm 33, the first 3 verses. Psalm 33, first 3 verses, we're going to pick this apart a little bit. 3 things in Psalm 33, verse 1. Let's read verse 1 and we'll jump into this. Rejoice in the Lord, O you righteous, for praise from the upright is beautiful. Here's the first thing to notice. Rejoice. That's the first word in this. Virtually any English version you get, that's going to be the first word. Rejoice. It's the first word in Hebrew in this. Rejoice. Be happy. What's coming next is happy. All right? What's coming next is going to be a good thing. Now, it's important. Verse 1 really sets up the rest of this. And the very first part of verse 1 is this word, rejoice. It's a good thing that's coming. Rejoice. Look, I grew up, unfortunately, sometimes in church I get this idea that, I'm serving for Jesus. Oh, it's really hard. Pray for me. This is really tough. And down and dour, and it's almost like discouraged. No, that's not it. Now look, there's times where it's tough, and there's times you got to work through, and there's some difficult things. I get all that. That's understandable. But man, when you're serving Jesus, it's a thing to rejoice in, right? Okay? It's a good thing. That's the first thing you notice. Here's the second thing, and it's a biggie. Rejoice in the Lord, O you righteous, for praise from the upright is beautiful. Now, begs the question, now, who's the righteous? Who's the upright? Who are these people? Here's a short answer. You and I. That's a short answer. Now, I'm going to give you a big caveat with this because there's a big thing that comes with this. See, because on your own, well, you ain't. Okay? Okay, on your own, you're not. Now, I realize, we're a city on a hill. Most of you have a connection with Todd. Most of you have a love of the Word, and I understand that. But I just do not like to make assumptions of people. And even in a group this big, I just don't like, look, there may be 2 or 3 of you going through the motions here. And we can't do that, okay? You have to say, you have to believe that what Jesus did on the cross applies to you, okay? So it's His death and subsequent resurrection that accounted for you. Now this is big because this is going to keep coming up in this passage. But you have to apply what He did on the cross to count for you. As a kid, I never understood why we called it Good Friday. Because to me, it was like, well, that's Bad Friday. That's when they, But no, it's good. Because this is how we become righteous. Look, you don't become righteous because you are. You don't become righteous because you're perfect. We sometimes read that and say perfect, and that's not it. It's righteous. It's right standing. You don't believe me? Let me see what the Apostle Paul says about this. A lot of places you could go out in the New Testament. I'm just going to pull one of them out for you. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 5. You could actually take from verse 12 and take the whole rest of that chapter. He's talking about our righteousness that we gain via Christ. It's summed up in the last verse. So let me read that for you. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21. For He, that's God, made Him, that's Jesus, who knew no sin, to be sin for us, that we might become the... Well, you all jumped on that pretty good. I was anticipating I'd have to do this like 3 times for you, but you caught it, yes. That we might become the righteousness of God through Him. Okay, so by that, you and I are righteous. So let's go back and look at Psalm 33:1 again. Rejoice in the Lord, O you righteous. This is to us. This is to you and I. Rejoice in the Lord, O you righteous, for praise from the upright, another way of saying righteous, is beautiful. Here's the third thing I want you to see from that verse. in English, beautiful, we use that word in a lot of different contexts. Okay? If you know anything about me and Bible study, I love word studies. I love them. I love to sink my teeth into what this word means and what that word means. And if I could find even extra biblical places where the word is used, I'm like, oh, this is great. You can get a big understanding of the word. I love to read what, particularly in Hebrew, what ancient rabbis thought of a particular verse or how they looked at a word. Man, I can glean so much stuff from that. So you start in English. So I start comparing different Bible versions. And Old King James uses the word here, comely. It's not a word we use much anymore. But the word beautiful in English mean a lot of different things. One of them can be kind of a, well, not kind of, it is, like in a romantic setting, okay? Beautiful, you're attracted to somebody. Guys, you know, it's okay, we're all there. Okay, so that's one way the word's used. And another way it's used is describing a particular scene. Let's say you're on top of a mountain. I know we don't have those in Ohio, but believe me, they exist. Okay, you go to places, you'll see them. You might see a picture of them. Okay, you're on top of a mountain, and you're looking out, and you see a valley. Maybe there's a farm down there. Can you imagine this? You know, and you got mountain ranges maybe in the background you see, and you might walk away from that and say, man, was that beautiful. Okay, here's another context of it. You might go to an event. See, we do this a lot with weddings particularly. We'll come away from a wedding, someone will say, man, how was the wedding? Oh, man, it was beautiful. Or you might describe your day that way. Get back from a day at the beach or something. How was your day? Oh, it was beautiful. It was great. Okay, so we use the word beautiful a lot of different ways in English. I wanted to find out, what's the Hebrew word here? What is it? Because remember, praise from the upright is beautiful. So what is it? So, man, I was digging. It was exciting. Here's what I found out. The Hebrew word means beautiful. There's no better way to translate that. Because that Hebrew word can mean the same thing, just like it does in English, in all those different contexts. You realize this. This is what God, how He considers our praise. What we just did is beautiful. That's how He looks at it as. Well, that's pretty awesome. Now, some of you are thinking, okay, that's cool, Jeff, but I don't see where that fits the Matthew 9 thing. Yeah, because verse 2 is coming up. It sets up verse 2. Here you go. Praise the Lord with the harp. Make melody, but make, that's a command here. Make melody to Him with an instrument of 10 strings. Up till maybe 6, 8 months ago or more, I would have read that verse and said, oh, that's nice. That's a nice verse. That's good. That's just fine. No argument here. It's great. Makes sense to me. But I got to tell you something. The Lord's been taking me on a journey with that verse and a few other verses, specifically about, of all things, harps. All modern stringed instruments have their origin in that ancient harp. We know of ancient harps. None have really survived that are more than 1,000 years old, but we do have drawings of them, like in Egyptian caves, Egyptian tombs. There's even some European caves where we have what looks to be somebody playing something like this. And they have multiple different versions of numbers of strings, etc. So, okay, that's kind of cool. So I got thinking about, what was an ancient harp? It's a piece of wood, got a string stretched across it. Maybe different size strings, they may be different lengths, they may be different thicknesses, and if you pluck them, or in some depictions we even have what we would call a bow that would go across it, and that's, of course, the string vibrates. Now, how it makes music? Y'all tracking with me so far? All makes sense? Okay, so I got to thinking, well, what are ancient strings made of? And how about modern violin strings? What are they made of? Particularly high-end concert. Okay, so if you make your living off of playing a violin in front of people, people pay to hear you play, your violin is going to be pretty good. And I bet the strings are really good. What are these things? Folks, when I started down this road, this was like ancient harp strings and modern-day violin strings, good ones, are made from the intestines of sheep. A certain manufacturer specifically wants lambs that are 4 months old. Now, for a harp, for a violin to make music, an animal has to die. It's stretched out over a piece of wood, and it has to be stimulated somehow to make music. Now, if you're not seeing the parallel to Jesus, let me walk you through this, okay? Jesus had to die. We know that from 1 Peter, right? We know that from the writings of Hebrews. We know that from Apostle Paul, but Hebrews makes a big deal about this. Jesus has to die. He's stretched out over a piece of wood. We call it a cross, okay? But that's not quite it. See, because you have to apply that in your life. Just like the violin, the harp, whatever it is, it's sitting there, does nothing. It's got to be used for it to do the thing the Creator has designed it to do. Make sense to you? Modern violins trace their history basically back to one area of northern Italy. It's called Cremona, Italy. Cremona was a city, and it still is, and a district. I don't know why, but it would seem like that was the center of the violin universe from about 1550 to the end of the 1700s. There were a lot, and this town wasn't big back then, but there were a lot of violin makers back then. Many of those same violins have survived to this day. In fact, violins that come from Cremona, Italy, and those are the top. Those are the creme de la creme here. Those are the best violins you want. Concert level violinists, they want a violin that's like 200-300 years old, made from Cremona, Italy. They don't want anything modern. They want that stuff. A lot of reasons why for it, and I won't go into it. Of the violin makers, there's quite a few famous ones. I'm only going to talk about one. It's probably the one you've heard about. His name was Antonio Stradivari. If you want to be picky, it's Antonio Stradivari. Okay. His violins, he made a lot of different instruments, 1,200 of them at least, mostly violins, but he made some violas, and he made cellos, and he made a couple guitars, and at least one harp. 1,200 of them, 600 of them survive. These are, well, he's considered in modern vernacular the GOAT, the greatest of all time violin maker. Okay, I want to show you a picture of one of them, just one of them. Okay, this is coming up here. Okay, this is Messiah. That's what the violin's called. Stradivari's violins are all named. Now, he didn't name them. They're named by usually a particular owner or player of it. We get another shot of it here that's out of its case. Coming up here in a minute. There we go. Okay. So that's it with out of its case. And we're going to show you another shot of it of a real tight piece on one of the ends of it. This is Messiah. Now, the reason it's called Messiah is kind of, see how beautiful that is? Hand carved from 1716. That thing's 305 years old. Absolutely beautiful. This is the only known Stradivari that's listed as new condition. This thing's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And guess what? It's worth north of $20 million. The last high-end Stradivari sold 2013 for over $15 million. So that's kind of where we're at. Now, Messiah has an interesting history. Stradivari made it in 1716, but he didn't sell it. Kept it in his workshop. He dies in 1737. We don't know for sure how old he was when he died. His last violin that we know of was made when he was 93. Yeah, all his life. Presumably he dies a few years later. It passes to his sons, and complicated set of things. It ends up where it is now in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. One of the people that owned it used to brag about this thing, that he had this beautiful as-new Stradivari. At the time was only 150 years old. I got this 150-year-old violin, Stradivari. It's beautiful. But he would never show it to anyone. Never take it out, never play it. And finally, somebody, in fact, it was his son-in-law, says, your violin's like the Messiah. People always talk about his coming, but he never appears. And that's how it got its name. It's hanging in a museum. It's 305 years old. It's only ever been played twice. Once was in 1937, almost 90 years ago. The previous time to that was 50 years earlier in 1891. This thing looks beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's worth a lot of money. But it does absolutely nothing. It is not doing the thing that it's been designed to do. It's hanging in a museum. Now look, I don't mean to be nasty or hard or cruel, but I got to tell you, I think there's a lot of people in the North American church that are like the Messiah. Okay? We're worth a lot. Okay? We got buildings, we got publishing arms, we got broadcast stations, we got all this stuff. We got all sorts of things, and that doesn't count all the individuals and their wealth and so on we all have together. We're worth an awful lot. We look really good. Man, I don't know that we're doing a whole lot. The harvest is plentiful. Laborers are few. We have to get out there and play our violins. Look, it's a command there. Make melody. We are supposed to do this. This is not an option. Don't get hung up on the word harp there. It's an idea of we are to praise it. We are to do the thing that our Creator has created us to do. You have to play your violin. Let me show you another violin picture. This one doesn't look too pretty. This is the Wallace Hartley violin. It's going to get 2 strings on it. The bridge is missing. That's a piece that the strings go over. It's missing. There's a sound post in it that's gone. It's got these 2 big nasty cracks on this thing. This violin, it's beyond repair. But you probably have a little bit of knowledge of this particular violin. It's not a Stradivari. When it met its demise, it was probably no more than 40 years old. The guy who owned it, Wallace Hartley, died with the violin. He was just 33 years old. He was the head bandmaster for the White Star Line. This guy grew up in church. He loved Jesus. We're going to meet him when we get to heaven. He loved Jesus. He grew up in church. He loved old hymns. And he loved to play his piano, or excuse me, play his violin. He played piano too, but he loved to play his violin, played his old hymns. Now, he played other things too, and that's why the White Star Line hired him to be the head bandmaster for their latest ship they were going to launch, and you know it as the RMS Titanic. He was just 33. He's pretty young to be the head bandmaster, and of course, back then, they don't call them cruises. They're transatlantic voyages. And in the first class dining room, you would have usually a live band. It's 8 to 10, usually string ensemble, and they would be playing during dinner. Well, the Titanic hits that iceberg on April 14th, 1912, 11:30, 11:40 at night. The band's dismissed, but Hartley calls them all back. Now, of course, this is more of a chivalry age here. So it's women and children first. You know, there's not enough lifeboats. And the men that are available can get on lifeboats. But they're employees of the White Star Line. They are not getting on a lifeboat. They know this. What do? Well, he assembles them at the top of the deck. And there's a lot of eyewitnesses to this. So I'm not just making it up. There's a lot of eyewitnesses. You can read all the testimony of this stuff. And they start playing. And they play their normal music set that they would do as the ship is sinking. Doing what they can to give any semblance of comfort, you know, to those dying. We can argue about how effective that really was, but they were doing what they knew to do. They finish. He dismisses all the guys. Says, do what you can to save yourself. But he sticks around. And he starts playing the song, Nearer My God to Thee. We don't know for 100% certainty that's what he played. All the movies depict that, but there's reason for that. He loved that hymn. He played it often. It is highly likely that that's what he played. As he starts, the rest of the band actually starts coming back. And they play all 4 or 5 verses of it. They play this thing, and that's it. And then that's it. They know the end is near. So Hartley takes his violin, and he puts it, we have the next picture, it's got the case up there. He puts it in this case, right there. The case is not watertight, but it does give a degree of protection to the violin. He straps it to himself, and it actually ends up being on top of his life preserver. When his body is found 10 days later, what do they find? the violin with it. Now look, a lot of us want to be like the Messiah violin. We look pretty. We're worth a lot. But we're just not doing anything. We want to be like this. Okay? Yeah, battered and bruised, we end our life well, doing the thing that God has called us and created us to do. This is so important. Because why? Because the harvest is plentiful. The laborers are few. There's not that many people out there playing music. There's not that many people out there laboring in the field. We need to do. This is the call of all of us. The harvest is plentiful. There's a lot to do. You don't have to go too far and you realize there's a lot to do. We just need to play our violins, folks. We need to do the thing that we are created to do. Because our Creator has us out there for a reason. Made us for a reason. We're to be like that Hartley violin. That's what we're supposed to be. All right, back to Psalm 33. Because we're not done yet. I can go on and on about Stradivari violins and stuff. I've bored Todd so many times with one. Yeah. Okay, so now verse 3. So back to Psalm 33. We're going to jump in. But before I do that, let me read verse 2 again. I'm going to read this again, but now I'm going to change a couple words. Okay? Follow me on this. Praise the Lord with your violin. Make melody to Him on an instrument of 4 strings. Don't get hung up on 10 there. Don't get hung up on the harp. Yes, they're literally true, and you can look at it that way. But I'm just taking a bigger application of this. Because I think, man, we've got to get out there. I've never been one as a kid. I've never understood the whole harp thing. Because as a kid, I kind of envisioned that's what heaven was like. You know, we sit around on clouds wearing white, and that's maybe true, but playing a harp. And I said, I don't want to do that as a kid. It's better than the other place, but you liked that, didn't you? But I'd rather be playing baseball or something. But see, it's a lot more than harp playing. It's the point is you are doing what God has designed and created you to do. So get out there and play your violin. All right? Okay. Here's verse 3. Verse 3. Sing to Him a new song. Play skillfully with a shout of joy. I absolutely love music. There's hardly any genres of music I don't like. I'm not a big fan of bluegrass, but that's another issue. But I just love music. But, of course, I just struggle with carrying tunes and things. I usually sit back there in the court. I apologize, because I know I sound horrible back there. And I get going with music, and I'm just singing along, and I realize, oh, man, Jeff, you are nowhere near the right key. But I love music. Sing to Him. It don't matter here. It don't matter here. Sing to Him a new song. Do the thing He's called you to do. Sing to Him a new song. Play skillfully with a shout of joy. Now again, the temptation is to read through that. Play skillfully with a shout of joy. That's kind of nice. When you do anything well, what does it take? Work, right? Yeah, there's a degree of talent in it that you start with. Yes, that's true. But it takes work, right? It's practice. It's practice. It's being diligent. It's, trying and succeeding. It's trying and failing a lot. Trying to fail. Finally, you try and succeed. Then you fail again, and you keep trying. And you work at it, and you work at it, and you work at it, and you're diligent. Now, we know that in every single area of life. Why do we say that somehow, I've just tried to witness for Jesus, and it just didn't work? Well, how many times did you try it? Well, I just went out one time, and it was off. Well, yeah, it probably was. It's the first time you tried it. It's okay. Just keep doing it. Play skillfully. He never said it was easy. Never said we wouldn't have setbacks. Never said we wouldn't have problems with it. And you're supposed to do it. We're making melody. It's a command. We're playing skillfully. We have to work at it. Okay, so a couple, maybe a month ago now, I did the open from Deuteronomy 13. And I'm going to read that again. I almost this morning just talked on this verse. Because there's so much in this verse. There's 6 verbs, and I want you to grasp these a little bit. Deuteronomy 13:4. This is all part of that skillful playing. And remember, we're playing skillfully, making a melody. Why? Because we're supposed to be out there playing our violins. We're supposed to be out there in the fields laboring. Why? Because the harvest is plentiful. The laborers are few. There's a lot of work to do. All right, so here's how we're supposed to work at it. Deuteronomy 13:4. You shall walk, that's the first one, after the Lord your God. Now, we tend to think, I get home from church today and I get something to eat. What am I going to do? I'm going to probably go to the park, take a walk, right? It's recreation. It's good for me. I need to walk. Some of you are saying, well, you got to walk like quite a few miles, Jeff. But it's it's recreation. It's fun. I enjoy it, and that's good. Okay, the word means that here, but it also means a lot more. Why? Well, I drove here like you did. I'm going to drive home. I didn't get here by walking. You lived in this time. What were you doing? Well, you're walking everywhere. You're walking to the market and back. You're walking to work and back. Whatever work it is you're doing, you're probably walking at work. You're going to visit grandma, you're walking there and back. You're doing anything. You are walking. So when read this. You shall walk after the Lord your God. This is in every single thing you do. And everything you do. That's just the first verb. And fear him. That's the second one. This doesn't mean afraid, scared. No, it doesn't mean that. It's reverent. It's respect. So you're going to respect him. All right? What is something, us folks my age, well, no, none of you are old, but my age and older, we think about that. You go, hey, young people just don't respect things. Why? Yeah, because we see this. Okay, you ever think that God looks at that the same way? When we disrespect him, we don't walk in fear of him. Okay, so that's part of it. You honor, you reverence him. Here's the third one. Keep his commands. All right, commands are another way of saying this. Okay, we keep it. Okay, to keep it, I kind of have to know what it says. Okay, well, that's a big deal because a lot of people, what, follow the Lord. Well, how much Bible reading are you doing? Well, I get it up some. Keep his commands. You got to be in the book. There's just no shortcut for this. There just isn't. You just can't, pop open a container and take a pill and think, presto, now I know God's word. No, you have to be in the book. That's the only way you're going to be able to keep his commands. You know what they are. Here's the next one. Obey his voice. Old King James says, listen to his voice. So it's not reading his commands. Now it's listening to his voice. Now, as I get older, I've noticed this, particularly in restaurants. Well, there's a lot of ambient noise. Man, sometimes I struggle hearing, and I'll do this little thing, and maybe you do this too. I'll lean forward a little bit. Sometimes I do this. I'll turn my head a little bit, trying to get an ear, and get either one, trying to get an ear closer to whoever's talking. And I'm trying to do it discreetly where they don't realize what I'm doing. So I'm trying to, sometimes I even do this little thing, scratch my ear, but I'm pulling in it. So I'm trying to hear them. Okay, now look. We're supposed to hear his voice. We got a lot of distractions around us. Sometimes you can remove them, but other times you can't. They're just there. And you got to listen hard. You got to make a point of, I'm going to lean forward. What are you saying? Why don't we catch this? We're going to lean forward. Do what you can to eliminate distractions, but sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can't, and you lean forward. Okay, so that's that one. Here's the fifth one. You shall serve him. But notice you're serving him. You're not serving yourself. Whew. A lot of us love to serve ourselves, and we love to be served. But man, you got to serve him. And finally, hold fast to him. That hold fast means catch by pursuit. We talked about that earlier. That all implies a degree of diligence, of work. There's a little bit to it. This just isn't a simple little thing. It's catch by pursuit. All right, I'm going to end with this piece here. One of the New Testament books, of course, I love them all, but one of them I really love to sink my teeth into is the Book of Colossians. Just love the Book of Colossians. And if you've gone through that at all, you've noticed where Paul makes this long progression of logical train of thought. Christ, he has this thing in chapter 1 about all the things that Jesus is. He's the head of the church, he's the head of the body, he's the creator of all things, in him all things consist, he goes through. And then you get in chapter 2, and he's talking a lot about Christ is supreme over vain philosophies. He makes this point of saying, look, don't get messed up in vain philosophies and all this stuff. And finally, you get to chapter 3, and now he's a bit more practical. He says, get rid of this stuff. He talks about all this filthy stuff that kind of hangs with us, and then put on all this other stuff. And he has a whole list of good quality. It's almost like getting undressed and then getting dressed. It's almost what the word looks like. And then you get to this. This is verse 17. If you want to boil Colossians down to one verse, I would say it's this verse. 17, chapter 3 of Colossians. And whatever you do, in word or deed, what is that missing? Not a whole lot, right? Whatever you do, in word or deed, do all, not do some, not do most, it's all, in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Look, folks, the harvest is plentiful. There's a lot of work to do. And Jesus, like then, is telling us now, his disciples, get out there, folks. Get out there in the field. You got to play your violin. You got to get out there and do the things that God is calling you to do. There's a lot of work to do. The world's a mess. We have some answers. We have the answer, right? Right? We do? So let's get out there. The harvest is plentiful. The laborers are few. Would you stand with me? Oh, I just leave you with this charge. I do not know, obviously, what God is calling each one of you to do, but I do know he's calling each one of you to do something. You're here, you're breathing, he's got a work for you to do, okay? All right, we can't sit back and be Messiah violins. As cool as they are, well, we can't do that. We need to be Hartley violins. We need to be out there serving constantly. That's what we need to do. Play your violin. Father,